What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of the Celtics Talk Weekly podcast. I am your host, Rob Payton, joined with my co-host, Nick Franco, and a very special guest. You guys know him at this point, my man, Finn Sands, a.k.a. Celtics Insiders. Guys, the Celtics now, we didn't get a real good chance to talk about last series for Game 5. We're going to talk about a little bit of that, but a lot happened around the league last night, yesterday. Or 2 nights ago, sorry, at this point. Or no, yesterday. I was right.
Yep.
I got my so the Knicks brutal collapse in Game 7 leads the Indiana Pacers waiting the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. Something that I did not think no one had on their bingo card, I don't think, was an Indiana Pacers Eastern Conference Finals appearance. Then out west, the T-Wolves, they took down the Denver Nuggets, the reigning champs. Some people, I think, believed a little bit more in them, guys. But let's touch on the Celtics Cavs real quick, because I'm interested to hear your guys' takeaways on that series as a whole, because to me, it feels like it was a very successful series, a Cleveland team that wouldn't back down. We handled them in 5 games. Some people felt the Celtics should have handled it better, but I don't know where you guys are at in terms of how the Celtics handled Cleveland in round 2.
Oh, I was muted.
You're good. You're muted again.
All right.
Here we go.
All right. I should be good now. I think the Celtics did a fantastic job in round 2 of handling the Cleveland Cavaliers. Obviously, without Kristaps Porzingis, a huge loss, but it's a huge advantage that we were able to rest him through the entire series if we weren't going to be able to use him.
Right.
I think Al did a fantastic job of stepping up. Hopefully we can see Xavier Tillman. I know he's dealing with some personal issues right now. I believe his father just passed away. Condolences to him. I think that he could be a large contributor, kind of take the weight off of Al next series if KP isn't healthy for the first 2 games. But I think Cleveland gave it their all in Game 5. I think we knew that we were going to get a underdog performance from them. Obviously, missing Donovan Mitchell for the final 2 games was a huge loss to them, detrimental loss, and weren't able to step up fully against the Boston Celtics. I think the Celtics did a great job of during the second half of solidifying that game more and being able to walk out of the series comfortably. You got a lot of. We knew that Cleveland was going to be a tough battle in Game 5, no matter what. When a team is facing elimination, you'll get dogs like Marcus Morris to come out of nowhere and have a underdog performance, but it just wasn't enough, and the Celtics were able to rest for the past 4 days and are now awaiting Indiana Pacers, who just went through a hell of a fight to get to where they are with the Celtics right now.
For me, when I look at Game 5, the first thing that stands out is the Celtics' depth and how well they play as a team. I'm looking at the stat sheet right now, and we had 6 guys in double digits, and that includes the entire starting lineup. I thought Al Horford, who struggled in Cleveland, responded phenomenally. I thought Derek White as well. He struggled to find his shot in previous games, but he got it back together. And then, when you look back into the games in Cleveland, I'm looking at down the stretch. Like, I don't care that Donovan Mitchell didn't play in Game 4. When it was wire to wire, I couldn't confidently say that last year's team was going to win that game just because of how dysfunctional they were down the stretch. But, even if the media is going to say that the Celtics should have won by 40 or whatever, the way they've been able to close out the games in the clutch is something that's important to me, just because of, we know what the past has been. We've seen collapses, and to see them come through and Jason Tatum hit big shots, Jaylen Brown to be steady instead of just a first half player, is something I'm excited about. And I think, down the road, that's something you hope they can continue to carry.
I think for me, it's like there's nothing against the Celtics if a team's playing up. And I think when you look at the previous Celtics collapses, the Celtics were playing down to their opponents. I haven't seen them playing down to either the Heat or the Cleveland Cavaliers this postseason. No. So for me, it's more so that teams are playing up. Like, teams are understanding that when you're playing the Boston Celtics, you're playing the best team in the NBA. So it's like, I look at that and I tip my cap, first of all, to the Cleveland Cavaliers, because they could have easily let off the gas in Game 5 and easily, once Mitchell was out of the lineup in Game 4, said, screw this, we're not winning the series. They didn't do that. So I loved how the series went. We handled it in 5. You figure Cleveland's a good team. Donovan, Garland, Mobley, they're well coached. JD's pretty solid coach. So, it makes sense. They took a game which you have preferred. It wasn't at home and it was in Cleveland. Sure. Yeah. But I mean, it's the playoffs. Weird things happen. And I think it's, very impressive that Boston's been able to go on the road for 4 games now and, handle business out there. So, for me, my biggest takeaway from round 2 is that, teams are going to play up to Boston. When they're playing the Boston Celtics, they're going to bring it every single night. This is a team that is now minus odds to win the NBA Finals, minus 1,000 plus to make the NBA Finals. This is like the clear-cut favorite, and teams are going to want to be the team to knock off this Celtic squad, and they're going to bring it every night, whether they're down 0-3 or they're up 3-0. Right? They're going to bring it, and I think you can't fault the Celtics for that. I think that. It's the playoffs. All these players are NBA talent. They can, any given night, you saw what Marcus Morris did in Game 5. So, I'm not really too, too worried about looking in all of that. Before we move on to the conference finals, a hot topic of conversation through the first 7 games of the playoffs was Jason Tatum and how he was playing. He struggled scoring offensively, putting the ball in the basket through the first 5 in Miami, and then the first 2 against Cleveland. And then you kind of saw him pick it up. He found his rhythm. He was moving the ball well. He was able to get to his spots. You're seeing a Jason Tatum now get defensive matchups that are in his favor. Tatum this year against Indiana, guys, he averaged 33 points per game, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists. He had his way against Indiana team this year. Mind you, an Indiana team that does not like to play much defense. So, with that being said, Tatum, moving forward, where are you guys at? And I think I know what you guys are going to say.
I think this is the most comfortable we've seen Tatum in a playoff, or the most mature Tatum we've seen in a playoff run. I think the way he's been able to spread the ball amongst the team and being able to understand that he doesn't have to play hero ball on this such talented roster is a huge thing, and the major thing that Boston Celtics have been pushing even on their media pages is the word sacrifice. Tatum has had to sacrifice that lead scoring role to help out the team, and he has brought in every other way. The effort on the defensive side when it comes to rebounding has been phenomenal for the team, especially with Kristaps out of the lineup. Al Horford is older. You can't rely on him to be the centerpiece of defense through 30 minutes of a game. I think Jason Tatum being able to fill in and being able to play down low and being able to get to those switches is huge for this team. And I think with coming into an Indiana Pacers series, being able to defend this team is what's going to beat the Indiana Pacers. If you get into a shooting battle with the Indiana Pacers, as we saw with Game 7 of last night, you're going to get Indiana on a hot night, and they sometimes will outdraw you.
Mm-hmm. When I look at Jason Tatum, I mean, he's a guy that I never really worry about. And I think it's just because he's so dynamic. Like, if you look at both sides of the ball, first off, I feel like people sleep on his presence on the defensive end. I feel like this playoffs, he's done an excellent job. And the media, that's never something they'll point out. Also, on these nights where he's not shooting well, you think back to the Miami series or the first 2 games against the Cavs, or even games 3 and 4 where he didn't shoot well either, he's still controlling the game. It's like he's developed into obviously not LeBron James, but the ability that the everything revolves around Jason Tatum, and it's pretty evident. He's such a good playmaker, shooter. Also, you have to consider the fact that he's been getting to the free throw line at a high clip in the recent games, which is definitely something that you need to see in a playoff stretch. And then I also feel like there's less pressure on him. Like in the previous years, we feel like he's almost had to play hero ball at times. But I just think that Jaylen Brown's steadiness throughout games, especially as of late, like I always thought of Jaylen Brown as a first half player, but now he's just been so steady. And then obviously you have the emergence of guys like Derek White, right, where you can just trust him down the stretch, either bringing the ball up the court or playing off ball and burying threes. And I think that goes as far as the other guys too, like Al Horford and Drew Holiday. It's just this team, when they're on, everything clicks, and it ultimately takes some pressure off for JT.
I agree. Tatum is the last player on this team I worry about. I think the point you made about him controlling the pace is, in my opinion, the whole story of how good Jason Tatum has become. And it's weird, Finn, because you look at that and you didn't see Tatum controlling the pace. There's game 4 against the Miami Heat, or really game 5 against the Miami Heat last year in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, when we were down 0-3. We come back into Boston down 3-1. I remember watching that game and thinking like, wow, this is like the first time I've seen Tim control the pace. Like he's taken over games offensively, right? The 50-point, just absolute offensive barrages he's had, but it was different type of like controlling the pace. He was just kind of unconscious offensively. But then it's like he flipped a switch against Miami where he was like, all right, he understood the defensive attention he drew. Because if it's interesting is if you look at the defense teams are running on Tatum now, it's Giannis wall-like. Like they're walling up Tatum to prevent him from getting to the basket. And Tatum has done this phenomenal job at deferring and being able to, move the ball and get the ball to where it needs to be. And Tatum probably, if we're counting hockey assists, Tatum probably averaging right around 15 assists per game.
Yep, absolutely.
Because he is finding and controlling the game so well. And I love that you mentioned that and pointed that out, because that's the story for JT with me. His ability to defer and his ability to control the game. And same goes for Brown. Brown has done a phenomenal job at, attacking and controlling the game at his own pace. He's not letting teams speed him up, forcing him into bad turnovers, forcing him into bad drives. And also, we saw it in game 4 against Cleveland. He deferred all game. It was Tatum. And then boom, here comes Brown. And Tatum, on the flip side, it was JT. It was him all game long. He just, the 3-pointer where, Tatum slaps Brown in the chest. Tatum had a lane to the hoop and he gave that ball up. So, I really do think that that's the growth of Tatum and Brown. That was the next step we were waiting for them to take. That controlling the game, having trust in the fact that Tatum and Brown are going to, have control. And they didn't have control in years prior. And I think that's been the difference this postseason. So if they can do that against Indiana, they're going to look really, 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 really well. But let's talk about Indiana a little bit. Again, this wasn't on my bingo card. I did have them getting past Milwaukee because they were so hurt, but I honestly thought New York was going to take it. They were just riddled with injuries. Tibbs ran his players into the ground this season and into the postseason. So I feel like it's only right if we start off with our predictions this series. Because, it, in my eyes, could go 4 games. It could be a 4-game clean sweep, but it could also, in a world crazy scenario, get pushed 7 somehow. So I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say and what your, Celtics versus Pacers predictions are.
I think the Celtics just need to run the Indiana Pacers right now. Since they're coming off of, they're not even skipping a beat. They only have 1 day off in between last series and this one. I think getting off to a physical start through games 1 and 2 are going to be a huge factor for the Boston Celtics being able to defend extremely well. It doesn't have to be a high-scoring game for the Boston Celtics. It just has to be a low-scoring game for the Indiana Pacers.
Right.
I think being able to take advantage of the injuries that they were riddled with, if New York were able to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals, I think we would have a much easier time with the New York Knicks than we would with the Indiana Pacers. It's just fun to play the New York Knicks, as everyone knows. I think Indiana is going to pose more of a threat as they came out a more healthier team. Plus the additions of the power forward and Pascal Siakam at the trade deadline and Miles Turner. That's going to be something that the Celtics are going to have to deal with is two big man team, and I think the Celtics are going to have to be able to deal with that. He's going to find himself with, and I think we can walk out of this series not in 5, but I think we'll most likely be in 6 games.
Yeah, I think I could definitely see it going 6. Ideally, 5. 5 games would be nice, and honestly, I'm confident that they could do it in 5. Like that still gives them, one game where the Pacers will have like their black magic fluke game where they're going to shoot, 55% from 3. It happens against the Celtics. We saw it with the Heat and the Cavs. So hopefully it's not in Boston. You'd rather have that be in game 3 or game 4. But just the Celtics, when you look at the rosters, I mean, first off, you go guy for guy, the Celtics are better. And I will give credit to Indiana. They have a powerhouse of an offense. Halliburton leading the charge. Siakam looks really good. Nesmith, credit to him. What the biggest difference is between the Celtics and the Pacers is defense. The Celtics and the Pacers both have elite offenses, but the Pacers don't have the same defense the Celtics do. When the Celtics want their defense to be good, it is. And we've seen stretches in the playoffs where they just lock down, whether it was Miami game 1 or game 5, and a couple games in the Cavs series. When the Celtics lock in on the defensive end, there is no doubt in my mind that they are the best defensive team in the NBA. When they're switching and then they're playing in transition, they're a force. So that's definitely something I'm going to look into as I'm watching the series. And then the other thing is I'm looking at the Pacers bench, and I'm looking at a guy like TJ McConnell, for example. I need Pritchard to match that. If it's one thing for the Celtics starting lineup to be better than the Pacers, but if Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser can come in and have a double-digit game here, Sam Hauser knocked down some threes, Pritchard changed the energy a little bit, and outplay the Pacers bench, I just don't see how it's plausible that Indiana's poor defensive-led team gets over the hump and even gets 2 games off the Celtics.
I love Celtics in 5, but I will say it goes whatever Boston wants it to go, and I full-heartedly agree, will back up that statement. If Boston wants this thing to be a sweep, it will be a sweep. And you say wants, it's because they could have swept Cleveland. Boston kind of gave up in the second half of game 2. They just kind of had like a screw this mentality, and you hate to hear it, but it's kind of the truth. So if Boston wants to have this thing go for, it will go for. If Boston doesn't want to engage against the Indiana Pacers, who aren't this big name, high power, Giannis, Jokic, right? Don't have the superstars of the league, although Halliburton is rising in here, it will go 7. However, I think it goes 5. Defensively, Indiana has nothing they can do. Like matchup wise, Nesmith is the matchup on Tatum, I'd assume, or Pascal maybe. You got Nesmith on Brown, and then you're gonna have Halliburton and I don't. Is it Mathurin at this point or
no? He's out for the
Nembhard, yeah.
Nembhard, excuse me. I mean, you're gonna have Nembhard going against either Drew Holiday or Derek White, and we saw Nembhard get absolutely torched by Jalen Brunson in the first 5 games.
Yeah.
So again, it's no doubt in my mind the Celtics win this series. I think it would have to be the biggest collapse in NBA history for the Celtics to lose this series and not make the NBA Finals, which makes me feel comfortable being a Celtics fan, knowing that it takes that magnitude of an upset to knock these guys down. But, we'll see, because for me, it's going to come at this stage of the playoffs. It comes down to your stars, I feel like. Obviously, the supporting cast plays a big role. You saw what happened against the Timberwolves and Nuggets. The Nuggets were unable to get any support outside of Murray and Jokic, and T-Wolves got great support from Conley and McDaniels and all those, Naz Reid. So I do think, but at this stage, the lights are bright, and you need your superstars to show up. You will not make a finals without your superstars doing it for you. Celtics have seen that firsthand against Butler and Curry. So for me, Tatum's on another stratosphere than Tyrese Halliburton is. And that's the difference. I mean, as talented as the Celtics are, and, I think they've finished 18 games ahead of them in the standings, right? All that. If you really want my X factor, why their Pacers don't stand a chance, it's because I don't believe in Tyrese Halliburton to show up at this stage. He's young. He's inexperienced. You're playing a team that is destined to win an NBA championship this season. So, doesn't mean I don't think it's going to be a fun series. I think this could be a sweep where each and every game is close. But I do think that Indiana just doesn't have it. You know what I'm saying? They just don't. And I think that, I don't know, but I think everyone around the league knows that. I don't think Indiana knows that. I think Indiana believes they can walk away with a win this series, but I don't know. I just don't think they have it.
Yeah, it's also important. I feel like when you look at Tyrese Halliburton in the games where they beat the Knicks, I think he was taking closer to 17 to 20 shots a game, and the games where they lost, he was only taking 11, 12-ish.
Right.
And something I'm looking at is Tyrese Halliburton's got to go up against Drew Holiday and Derek White, and that's no easy task. Taking 17 shots in a game is one thing, and making them is a different thing. Right. So for them to win, Tyrese Halliburton has to take a lot of shots and make a lot of shots. And I know at least one game he's going to have a 25-point night. However, I'm not sitting here so confidently saying to myself that, Tyrese Halliburton is going to be able to drop 25 points every single night. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think the game plan is ultimately going to have to be Siakam and Nesmith and Miles Turner beating them.
Right.
And who knows, maybe that happens one game, but I really can't see that happening more than once, or I guess more than twice.
The only advantage I see the Pacers having is on the boards. They are very solid in depth and in big men, Siakam, Miles Turner, Isaiah Jackson, and Jalen Smith.
Right.
Yeah. And they are extremely solid at that point, but hopefully Al Horford can hold his own against those younger guys. And like I said, I'm hoping Xavier Tillman is going to be back in rotation and utilized, because this is definitely a series where that should be necessary. I think Luke Cornett has done a fantastic job, but having someone a little bit more athletic to match up with those caliber players is necessary, especially when you're playing a team that's so talented at big man.
Well, here's the question then. Is Kristaps. So Kristaps has pretty much been ruled out games 1 and 2. Already been ruled out game 1. You figure he's not going to play game 2. For me, there's a world where the Celtics don't need Kristaps at all in this series. But there's also a world where you're going to bring him back from an injury entering the NBA Finals. So obviously, it's you don't want to rest Kristaps Porzingis in the Eastern Conference Finals. You want Kristaps to get some games under him, because at the end of the day, he's not resting. He is hurt. He is injured, and he does need to come back from that injury, and that doesn't just happen with a snap of a finger. So the Celtics can beat the Pacers without Kristaps, no doubt in my mind. However, for you guys, when's the ideal landing spot of a Kristaps return? Because I would really love to see him playing, whether it's 25 minutes, whether there's no minute restriction, whatever it may be. I do want to see him on the court before the finals take place, because I think, honestly, the worst case scenario for the Celtics team is Kristaps comes back in the finals and he's just not ready and not in shape. And you know what I'm saying? Because there's a world where that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the ideal time for KP to come back is, I think you can only answer that after games 1 and game 2.
Right.
Obviously, he's been ruled out for those 2 games, but obviously you want KP to play before the finals, but almost like what the Celtics did with Robert Williams in 2022 against the Nets, bring him back and have him just play 14 minutes a game to start out. Right. Let's not force anything. Let's not overdo it, but just get a feel just for what it's like to play in the playoffs. Obviously, he played in round 1 a little bit, but just, to get back on the court, maybe find his groove, hit a couple post shots, play 15 minutes a game, and hopefully what is game 4 and maybe even a closeout game, and or maybe another 15 minutes in game 5 if it goes back to Boston, which it probably will. But just slowly bring him back. Even if it is a close series and say it's 2-2 going back to Boston, I don't see Porzingis playing more than 15 minutes a game. I honestly think that if he comes back in this round, he won't exactly be 100%. I think it's more so just for him to get some reps and just to get a feel. Because, as you said, Rob, obviously you don't want to start the NBA Finals and have that be your first game back. That's a challenge. And, it could kill the Celtics' rhythm, groove, considering the lineups they're running with right now. So as long as he's playing 10 to 15 minutes a game, and looks okay, I think I'd consider that ideal. And maybe game 4. I think game 4 return is realistic.
Yeah, I would say game 3, and I think you could have the Indiana Pacers. Once again, they have played 2 more games than the Boston Celtics have in the past week, and I think didn't Orlando and Indiana go game 7 as well?
Correct.
So they have played 14 games this playoffs, and the Celtics have played 10.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
No. That one's 6. Indiana,
Okay.
Indiana, Milwaukee
13.
went 6. Yeah.
Okay. So 13. So they've played 13 games compared to the Celtics 10. I think you could fatigue this team down, dwindle them down during games 1 and 2, especially if you come out of that home stretch 2-0. I think working them back in, as you guys said, with a minutes restriction through games 3 and 4, and ideally we say a sweep, but if it does come back home and it starts getting into more meaningful games, depending on how Indiana's playing, if you start to work them back a little earlier, if it does come down to, knock on wood, a game 6 or 7, you could have Kristaps be a realistic threat during those games.
Right.
If you work them in earlier. So just take those baby steps as time goes, and I think the past 4 days have been momentous for him.
I will say this before I talk about Kristaps. I think Indiana's biggest punch they're going to throw to the Celtics is going to be game 1, because they're coming off of this explosive shooting performance in game 7 in New York. They're going to be playing in the Eastern Conference Finals. I think when you got a great shooting team like Indiana, those are the games. You remember when Boston came off of game 7, win against Miami in the Eastern Conference Finals, went to the NBA Finals, and they were hot coming out in game 1, right? They had that insane 18-2 to run in the fourth quarter in Golden State, and their shot was just there. And then their legs went. I think that's what you're going to see against the Celtics for the Indiana Pacers, is that they're going to come out game 1 firing. Again, big game 7 win. And then I think you'll see their legs start to go. In terms of the Kristaps injury, it's weird because I would love to rest him. I would. I mean, I think you can handle these guys with or without Kristaps. I don't think he's like a big X factor against this team. However, again, I don't want him coming back for the finals and you're managing his minutes. I would love to see him playing like 20 minutes a game from game 3 on, and then ramp him up in the finals, because you'd figure he's got some time to, get his legs back under him with practices and some game reps and whatever it may be. So, do I think we see him game 3? Probably. If you want me to guess, I think game 3 is the most realistic start time for, probably game 3 or 4 in that area. But, my personal preference is just I can't make up my mind what I want, because, you know, you got one side of it, like I said, where he's healthy and 100% in the finals, but at the same time, he's got to have that like weird grace period where he's getting back from an injury. Or do you bring him back at like 90%, 85% in the Eastern Conference Finals and risk another injury? So wait and see. Again, if I were to pick, probably rest him, push him as long as he needs, because he is, a big piece to what the Celtics do. But let's talk West now, because the Western Conference is a super fun conference finals, in my opinion. You got the Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks. Luka and Kyrie versus Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns, I guess. Jaden McDaniels, whoever you want to call the B, probably Cat. I will say this. I had Dallas going to the finals at the start of the playoffs, and I think I still have them coming out of the West right now. I think that Minnesota's good, and I know I hate to steal this out of your mouth, Finn, because I know it's going to come out of your mouth. I do see the 2022 Celtics comparison. Finn, I'll leave that to you. I do see that. Finn, I guarantee he's going to tap into that a little bit. However, I think Minnesota didn't beat Denver in Game 7. Denver beat Denver. And I really do think that matters, because they didn't wow me. They wowed me in Game 6, no doubt about it. But they didn't wow me in Game 7. And I do think that's a game you should wow me in. Maybe I'm being overcritical, but I think Luka, Kyrie, I think a lot of focus on Ant. Oh, is this Ant's league? Is Ant the face of the league? Luka Doncic is in year 6. He is ready to take that step to the finals. And I think it happens this year.
I think that we go through. I think it's going to be Minnesota. I think Anthony Edwards is this year's Jimmy Butler. I think that he's done a fantastic job of leading his team. And I'm not too sure of what the Mavericks have under Kyrie and Luka. I think that they're a very top-heavy team, and their depth isn't as strong as the Minnesota Timberwolves would be. And I also think that Minnesota poses a much bigger threat with their two center lineup with Cat and Gobert. And I think Jaden McDaniels is going to be a big threat. And they just have a lot more role players in Minnesota that you can rely on to have a great playoff performance compared to the Mavericks, where you know what you're going to get out of Kyrie Irving. You know what you're going to get out of Luka Doncic. And I just think that Minnesota just has more to push them over. And I think Dallas is kind of a weirdly put together team in my eyes. I think that they are relying on Gafford as their center and Lively, which I don't know if that's gonna be able to get them over the hump. But I think Luka is due for coming into his own in a year or so. But I don't know if it's with the roster they have here now.
Yeah, I think that I ultimately think that the Timberwolves are going to win. However, I could see Dallas, pulling something out and making it closer. I guess even winning, just on the fact that when you have two guys as talented as Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, I feel like it's always hard to count them out. Like in another world, or maybe even this one, Luka Doncic averages 35 to 40 points in a playoff series and goes crazy. I think the biggest question mark for me when you look at the Dallas Mavericks is how they're going to defend the double big. I'm a fan of Lively, and I think Gafford adds some value too, but it's not like you can play those guys at the same time. And I think if you can't just throw, Derek Jones Jr. onto one or Cat or Gobert, right?
Right.
And I think that's ultimately going to cause too many problems. I think if, you had Maxi Kleber, this could be a completely different series, a guy that can stretch the floor, bring Gobert out of the paint. But as of now, I just think that, Rob, as you mentioned earlier, they remind me of the 2022 Celtics and the fact that when they want to, their defense is at the top of the league, and you know, the train conductor Anthony Edwards is a special talent, and we've seen that over the past couple games. So, I'll always say it's hard to count out a team with two superstars and Doncic and Irving. However, I just think that it's too much of a hill to climb, considering the fact that the double big lineup is connected. Anthony Edwards just been so solid, and their defense will strap you.
I will say this about Ant. I love him. I think he is awesome. I think he is fun to watch. I love that little, I love that Mamba-esque mentality he's got. But I also do think that there is some media saturation with this whole thing. And I'm not taking anything away from him because he has been phenomenal. He wasn't phenomenal in Game 7, but he has been phenomenal in the playoffs. And I think as a basketball fan right now in the NBA, something you kind of got to be mindful of is, the league in the media is searching. I mean, it's putting it out right in front of you. It's searching for its new face. Everyone knows it. Who's the next LeBron? Who's the next Curry? Who's the next Durant? The Kobe, the Jordan, right? Everyone's searching for it. And I think the true reality of the matter of the fact is there is none. I do think we're in a time where the league is so talented and so diverse in talent that it's going to be a lot of different players, a lot of different years. And everyone thought Jokic was this runaway world's best player. And I guarantee you that narrative is wiped clean off the earth halfway through next season. They did it with Giannis. Everyone latched on to Giannis after the 2021 championship and was like, all right, this is our guy. This is our next LeBron. He's the world's best player. It didn't stick long. So, the thing with Ant is I think he's so marketable that he's getting a little too much praise. And it pains me to say that because I do love Ant, that Luka's the best player in that series. And I think people are tending to forget that. Like Luka Doncic, mind you, he's been to a Western Conference Finals now. He's got a little bit of experience under his belt. And if you know me, I'm not the biggest Luka fan. But what I will say is that I got a feeling he's going to remind people how good that guy can be. So I think it'll be interesting because, Finn, you said defense, and that is, to me, again, to everyone, probably the deciding factor because I see a lot of James Harden in Luka's game, and we have seen James Harden in the Western Conference Finals. That offense just doesn't work. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Mm-hmm.
But
what about Kyrie, though?
Right.
If Luka's having a rough stretch, especially in the second half, I feel like that's when you can just expect Irving to lock in and do Kyrie stuff. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think Luka, that's the thing. For me, last year with the Mavs, it was your turn, my turn. Luka dominates the ball. Kyrie kind of plays this weird, undefined role. And that's why I was so off on Luka because I was like, I don't know if this guy can defer. Can Luka defer? And then all of a sudden, 40 games into the season, Luka starts deferring. And you're like, oh my God, they're a powerhouse. They were one of the best, top 3 statistical team net rating wise the last 30 games of the year. And it's no shock to me. They're in the Western Conference Finals. And the main reason why, defensively, they've been phenomenal as well. Not as good, nowhere near Minnesota. Minnesota's versatility is just truly outside of Boston in a league of its own. But that's the difference. If Luka Doncic defers when he needs to defer, which is a crazy sentence to say, but Tatum needed to do it, and now look what happened with Boston. Then they'll win this series. But I do think it's going to be a fun series. Both of them, even if Boston wins this series in 4 games, I think it'll be a fun 4 games. Mm-hmm. Well, fun for us, maybe not fun for others.
I also think that a very underrated thing that people have to watch in this series that I think could swing either way is the Washington versus McDaniels matchup.
Yep.
I know they're completely different players, but if you have PJ Washington giving you 15 to 20 a night, or if you have McDaniels giving you the same thing, that's a massive swing, especially considering what both do on the defensive end. So that's just something I'm going to keep my eye on, and I think could ultimately, swing a game or 2.
So you guys got Timberwolves Celtics finals.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the Timberwolves are going to win, but I would not be surprised at all if Dallas won. Like, I could definitely see Lucas throwing some punches.
All right. I like that because I'm on Team Dallas. Like I see Dallas winning, but I also see I'm like the flip side of you.
Yeah.
I think Dallas wins, but I wouldn't be shocked if Minnesota comes out of the West. But back to the Celtics side of things. Obviously, Game 1 is tomorrow. If you're listening to this, Game 1's tonight. Before we close off this show, some key factors for you guys. I know we touched on it, but not really specifically in Game 1, which again is tonight if you're listening to this.
I think just being able to take advantage of how fatigued this Indiana Pacers team is going to be. I wouldn't be surprised if I haven't gotten a chance to look at their injury report. I'm sure that will be posted today, as today is tomorrow. I think we'll find out more of who's going to be on the court. We're definitely going to see some questionable players. I think just being able to take advantage of being able to put out the fire before it even starts with Indiana. They're still feeling a great sense of momentum, and being able to cut them off early and not allowing them to fight back is going to be huge. I think just keeping a advantage throughout the whole series and not allowing those 4 days off compared to Indiana, who has been playing, that might go Indiana's way, because if the Celtics go into Game 1 nonchalant and Indiana still has any juice left in the tank from their shooting performance during Game 7, we could be in for a rough night.
Yep, I agree. I think the most important thing for me, put the pedal to the metal on the defensive end, right? Rob, you mentioned earlier that just because they're coming off of Game 7, they could, still be hot going into Game 1. I expect the Celtics to be switching everything, locking the perimeter down. And if their defense is tight, it's just a whole different ballgame considering the transition play, right? When you look at the Celtics and when they get stops and what it does for the season transition, I mean, they're just a whole different beast. And considering that the Pacers are going to be fatigued to an extent, playing in transition could be key. I also think it's important, as I mentioned earlier, I'm looking at a guy like TJ McConnell. I need that to be matched or even outplayed by the Celtics. So I'm looking at guys like Hauser and Pritchard. What are they going to bring me off the bench? I think that's always a good thing to point at. And then lastly, I know Tatum's better than Siakam, but let's not forget Jaylen Brown is too, right? So if Jaylen Brown can outplay Pascal Siakam, there's no chance that this is a series, if I'm being honest. So if Jaylen Brown takes that matchup personally, outplays him, I mean, I think it's going to be a tough chance that they lose Game 1.
Defense. Franco, you talked about it. Finn, you talked about it. Defense has to be there. This is a team that loves to go quick. Celtics like to go quick too, but play at your quickness. Don't play at their quickness. Just hammer them defensively, because I really think that, they haven't seen anything to the level of the Celtics on that side of the ball. And then, excuse me, this isn't a Game 1 ask. This is a series ask. Win at home. I don't want a home loss anymore. Because I will say I'll be a little frustrated if they lose another game at home. Now, will I be worried? No, right? Series wise, but you get to the finals. If you're slipping games up at home, that's not a good habit to get into. And listen, it happened in Series 1 against Miami. You responded well. It happened in Series 2 against Cleveland. You responded well. If it happens in Series 3, they'll respond well. But let's not get to that point. I would really like to go up 2-0 against these guys. If they're going to win a game, let it be Game 3. That's really what I want to see. However, again, Celtics and Pacers, Mavericks and Timberwolves, we're down to the final 4, guys. It's a super exciting time. I thank everyone for joining us and listening. Finn, thank you so much for coming on. Franco as well. Guys, if you're not already following us on social media, all of our links are links. I'm sure you're already following the Insiders, but the Insiders links will all be in the description down below. We appreciate the support we've been getting, guys. And again, we'll see you guys tomorrow night or tonight when you're listening to this for game 1, Celtics Pacers. Till next time, guys, go Celtics.